So in this video, I'm going to tell you the top 3 reasons why mobile home park contracts typically do not make it to the closing table. If you don't already know me, Armand Violi, MHPValue.com. We're the nation's #1 company at maximizing your mobile home park value. So top 3 reasons. So I would say reason 1 why buyers do not close on the contract to buy your park is you just did not vet them enough to know that they are a credible buyer. So I would say this is kind of a pandemic in the mobile home park world, and it doesn't affect other asset classes as much, like multifamily or retail centers, because they're a little more investor based and institutionalized. But in the mobile home park space, you have a lot of mom and pop, kind of unsophisticated small business style owners, that it's created this environment where a lot of experienced investors from other asset classes have came into the space and were able to get a lot of parks severely undervalued. What's that created is an opportunity for wholesalers to come into the space and lead you to believe that they're going to buy your park, get it under contract at, let's say your park's worth 1.4 million. They'll get you under contract at 1.1 million and assign it to another guy without you knowing for 1.2 million. That guy actually closes it for 1.2, so you get your original 1.1 promise, but that wholesaler is essentially misleading you and stealing $100,000 in equity at the closing table. Now, I wouldn't say it's stealing because he did promise you your exact value, but the thing is, you don't want to be going back and forth with a bunch of credible end buyers telling you the truth, and then one guy who's misleading you and is actually going to just go assign it for a fee is the buyer you ultimately run with. Now, the problem is a lot of these wholesalers are playing a volume game. What that means is if they just, without actually knowing what your property is worth, if they just think it's within realm of that, they'll get you under contract with no intention to close it themselves, and that way it just buys them some time to go try and find an actual end buyer. And then they might renegotiate you down, but I promise you that person is not going to close it themselves, and then it ends up ultimately falling out. I would say that is the #1 reason for contracts falling out, is there's just so many not real buyers and so many non-credible guys trying to get involved in this mobile home park space that it's still kind of a pandemic in this industry. Now, reason #2, and this happens a lot of the time when we agree on financials, we agree on price, it goes under contract with a credible buyer, but a lot of times through the due diligence timeline and inspection of the park, you always find out that something not 100% preferable as far as infrastructure of the park. And I'll explain, like a property we just recently dealt with was a 100-lot park, and just to keep this confidential, in a strong MSA of Ohio. And there was a little bit of hair on this deal, in that there was a lot of vacant park on homes that either needed to be heavily rehabbed or torn out. So on the front end, you knew it was kind of a heavy lift project going into it. The issues we ran into this property were some of the sewer lines haven't been replaced in a while, and the water lines also have issues. But then on top of that, we had the electrical pedestals at a lot of the lots were still 100 amps, when most brand new homes are going to need 200 amp pedestals. So even though we had a credible buyer going into it and we were in agreement on price, his assumptions for how he was going to improve the park by bringing in brand new homes and selling them off was going to take a lot more money than we previously thought, just because of some hidden infrastructure problems that typically aren't shared on the front end. That's neither a fault of either the buyer or the seller, but it is something to take into account. One thing that we do take into account if you do run with one of our free evaluations is we do adjust the pricing and evaluation of your park depending on what the infrastructure is, so that way you're aware of it on the front end, so you don't end up going under contract at one price and then you end up finding out later on, after you've wasted 2 to 3 months going back and forth in contracts, and now you're under contract thinking you're going to sell the park, then all of a sudden the deal doesn't work anymore because of some hidden infrastructure issues you didn't know about. So that's probably the second most common reason. Third most common reason is a very simple one, and this is really on the seller's end, is a lack of books and records, or their collections are really poor. I group those together because they kind of go hand in hand. If you sell your park on the premise that it makes $1 million a year, and then when you actually look at the collections over the last 6 months, it should reflect 6 months, half the year, it should reflect $500,000 in at least collections. Expenses and net income aren't that important because new buyers are going to have the way that they run their park and use their own expense assumptions. But the income needs to match up and be tracked to match up, especially if they're getting bank financing. So if you're selling your park on the premise that there's $1 million in income, and then once they're under contract and they see it's $800,000 in income, obviously you're going to have a huge issue, and that will usually cause a major retrade or the contract to fall out. And this is something that's super avoidable on the front end if you work with a credible group or just get a proper evaluation from us. So to summarize this video, top 3 reasons is 1, it's just not a real buyer in the first place. 2, there's hidden infrastructure problems or things that are just deeper than the surface level financials and MSA stats of the park. And then 3 is if you're going under contract without proper financials, proper underwriting, bad books and records, poor collections, etc., etc. Hope you guys like this video. Again, if you are selling your mobile home park or just wondering what it's worth in case you want to sell it in the future, have us give you a free evaluation. We go super in-depth, super detailed to help you avoid all these issues. There's absolutely no charge, no upsells, no catches, completely free of charge. Just go to our website, click the link in the description, free evaluation now, and I'll get in touch with you personally within 48 hours. Thank you.